So say hello to Nolan Finley of the Detroit News and Stephen Henderson of American Black Journal. We're sitting down here in Clawson. Again, I feel like we should have something different in our glasses and our mugs at a brewery. But
it's the brewery's not open
a pretty
yet.
nice little place.
It is. It is. It's got a nice little main street here.
Good downtown.
14 in
Good
Illinois.
restaurants.
There's
And
actually
this
some
looks
really
like
cool
it'd be a
stuff.
fun place to come to here.
Yeah.
This Black
So
Dogs.
yeah, it's nice to get out and about a little bit. A lot of stuff going on this week. It's funny when I text you guys saying, "All right, what do you want to talk about?" We usually kind of have some of the same things on our minds that have been happening. And one of the things was the report that came out from Detroit Future City. And I think it's kind of interesting how Detroit Future City has morphed over the last 9 years in terms of what kind of information they're bringing out about the city and kind of what it takes for the city to succeed. Stephen.
Yeah. I think I've talked with Anika Goss-Foster about this before. They want to be the ones who sort of set the table for what the city looks like now and what it might look like in the future. They don't want to make the decisions. They don't want to sort of advocate for one choice or another, but to sort of lay out what those choices look like based on the demographics, based on the decisions that we've made before. And they've actually done a really good job, I think, of adapting to that space rather than the sort of strict planning space that they kind of started in.
Right, and Nolan, when you see this report come out talking about growing the middle class, specifically the black middle class in the city of Detroit, when you look at the numbers and the disparity of only 25% of the population is middle class in the city, and the region-wise you're looking about 38%. What stood out for you in looking at that?
Well, if you think about it, Detroit was the place where the middle class was born. The $5 workday, Henry Ford's $5 workday, and the auto plants, that started the middle class in America. And this, if you look around at these neighborhoods, these were all middle class neighborhoods. And now there's only 25 middle class neighborhoods left out of 250 some in the city. It's like 10% of the city's population, or city's neighborhoods, are middle class, only 25% of the population. It really speaks to the challenges ahead for the city in creating a diverse economic base.
Yeah, when you frame those challenges, though, then you also start to look at, okay, what are some of the solutions to this, which is a large kind of systemic shift of jobs and education.
Right. So I saw a lot of my life sort of unfolding in this report.
Oh, how so?
I grew up here in the 70s and 80s at a time when Detroit was not just the home of the middle class, but the home of the black middle class and this emerging, very stable middle class that populated the city through much of the late 70s and 80s and into the 90s. This report shows how that has been dismantled by a number of different factors. One of them is depopulation, right? Most of the black middle class left the city in the 2000s, but the people who were here also got a lot poorer. Neighborhoods like the neighborhoods where I grew up are in much worse shape now. People who've been there for a long time don't have the things that they had. The neighborhood where I was born over on the west side was one of the places that African Americans were first allowed to buy houses in the city of Detroit in the early 60s. The investments that those families made in real estate should be worth way more today than they are. Now they're worth less than they paid back then.
And Detroit Future City actually studied, I think it was last year, they took a look at the number of homeowners versus the renters, and the renters have now outweighed the homeowners as well.
Absolutely. We've lost all of that investment capital that we had, not just for African Americans, for everybody, but the African American inflection of that really stands out in a city that, again, birthed the black middle class in a way that other cities did not.
So go ahead, Nolan.
So you need, according to this report, 33,000 more middle-class households in Detroit to bring it up to the national average. And you have a lot of neighborhoods on the verge of middle class. And what this report said, one of the largest obstacles, other than the ones we think about, schools and crime, one of the largest obstacles is auto insurance. If we could solve that issue, and you would bring more middle-class families in and keep more middle-class families. And I think that informs the current debate on what we do with no-fault insurance.
Oh, and that's percolating right now, too.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's also a question, though, of what do you do to move the people who are still here in the city into the middle class?
Into that, okay.
And those are two different questions, right? Can you attract people back is one issue. Can you do better by the people who are here is another one, and I think a tougher one, in fact, to crack. You can't solve the problem without doing either one of them, though. If as long as you have as many people without opportunity living in the city as you do, we're not going to get to where we would need to go, no matter how many people we bring back.
So I love when you look at this and you say, okay, so Detroit Future City kind of frames and gives people the numbers and says, okay, look, this is where we need to get to. So then the actionable thing is, so who then picks up this report, Nolan, and says, okay, what can we do with this to actually start to change some
Well,
things?
I think it dovetails nicely with this strategic neighborhood initiative that the mayor and the business community and the foundations have going. This $125 million to revive 12 neighborhoods, to create commercial strips, to create anchors so you can restore neighborhoods around the commercial strips. I think these two initiatives works very nicely together, because it does identify this report identifies neighborhoods that are on the cusp, and so that investment, if you can shore up and provide anchors for neighborhoods, you could both keep people and bring people back in.
What do you think?
You've got to do that. You've got to fix opportunity, not just schools, but opportunity to get to work, to acquire skills that put you in the middle class permanently as opposed to temporarily. And you've got to deal with, this is something that we don't talk enough about in Detroit, you've got to deal with the growing isolation that a lot of these neighborhoods are beset by. There are people who live in these places who don't have the means to get to any place else. So unless you're going to grow jobs in their neighborhood, they can't take an advantage.
Yeah.
There's billions of dollars being invested in Detroit right now. That's enough money to create and stabilize a middle class in the city if we have people trained and ready to take those jobs, and if you can, once they get those jobs, if you can keep them in the city. Because the outward migration hasn't stopped.
Yeah. All right, putting the money in the right place. All right, let's talk a little politics. Governor Whitmer's making some moves, and she kind of nixed a deal this week for an immigration center to buy the Ionia, the prison in Ionia. That was interesting, Nolan. That kind of popped up on your radar.
It's also boneheaded. I mean,
why do you think it was boneheaded?
Well, one, Ionia is one of those counties who've been hit hard by the loss of their core industry, which is prisons. You've had 2 prisons closed there over the last decade or so. This would have brought back 300 jobs, restored this eyesore to use, put it on the tax rolls for the first time. It was something this community was looking forward to, and the reasoning to kill this project was Whitmer didn't think detaining immigrants reflected Michigan values. Well, here's a clue. Those immigrants are already being detained. They're in county jails all over the state where they're mixed with criminals, mixed with others. This would have put them in a more humane environment and would have brought economic opportunity back to that community. She allowed her personal sort of politics and ideology to trump good policy.
Well, or was it a morality stand in terms of they couldn't guarantee that they were not going to be separating families?
They
and so
already
she said,
are. They already are. These people are already detained.
But the idea of exacerbating that or doubling down on it for the benefit of Michigan jobs or whatever.
How so? They're already being detained, Steve.
Hold on. The idea of growing our economy on the backs, first of all, of more prisons, which is part of the problem here in Michigan, is that we spend more on prisons already than we do on education, and the idea of indulging the current administration's immigration policies, which are not moral. And I don't think that's just an ideological position, that's a moral position. And I don't think there's anything wrong with a governor who's elected by the people of this state to take that position and say, we don't want to be part of that.
Hurting the people of the state with this. These are folks who are already detained. Doesn't increase the number of detentions. It does put them in a more orderly setting, take them out of the county jail.
Aiding and abetting the immigration policy is not.
You're not changing. You're not changing the immigration policy, and it's not.
You're not changing it, but she's saying not here.
Well, it is here.
We're not going to do
They're
it.
in our county jails, so let's not pretend they're not being detained.
But this would have made permanent our role.
No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't have changed.
Sure, absolutely.
Wouldn't have changed a thing. These people would have still been detained. This way, they're detained in a more orderly way, apart from
So when you
the
see
regular
injustice,
jail population.
rather than saying we don't want to be part of that and it shouldn't be happening, we
we
say,
are
well,
part
where's
of that.
our where's our
We're
benefit
part of
in
that.
the
They're in our
injustice?
county jails.
They probably shouldn't be there either.
Well, they are.
But the point
so
is,
we're not fixing
why,
anything.
why
we're
make
just,
that worse?
We're just making bad policy and cheating, cheating Michigan, a Michigan
Yeah, I
community
disagree with that.
of economic opportunity and jobs.
All right, well, we're going to take it up hopefully with the governor next week when she joins us on